15 years ago in Sweden, 4 out of every 10 purchases were paid in cash. Last year, it was 1 in 20. And you probably can't remember the exact day you stopped carrying it. There was no announcement, no vote. You just tapped a phone one morning, and a technology that had lasted for 3,000 years quietly began to disappear from your pocket. Here's what almost nobody noticed while it happened. The money replacing cash can do something a coin never could. It can be watched. It can be counted. And under the right rules, it can be told a single word that physical cash has never once obeyed. No. Over the next half hour, I'm going to show you exactly how far that goes. Real digital currencies already live in your world, a test where money was quietly given an expiration date. A weekend when a democratic government froze hundreds of bank accounts without a single judge signing off. And one sentence said out loud by one of the most powerful bankers alive that lays the whole thing bare. But I'm also going to show you the part the scary videos leave out, because the country that went furthest into this cashless future, Sweden, is now the country sprinting to reverse it. This isn't a story about a plot, it's a story about a choice. And it's being made right now, mostly without you. This is the end of cash. Start with a question that sounds too simple to matter. What is cash actually? Not what it's worth, what it does. Pull a bill out of your wallet and hand it to someone, and 3 things happen, instantly and invisibly. The payment is final. No chargeback, no pending, no reversal. It needs no permission. No bank has to approve it. No server has to be online. No name has to be attached. And it forgets. That bill doesn't know who you are, what you bought, or where you've been. It carries value and nothing else. For most of human history, that wasn't a feature anyone designed. It was just what money was. Anonymity wasn't a loophole. It was the default. And because it was the default, we stopped seeing it, the way you stop hearing a sound that never turns off. Digital money is the mirror image of all 3. Every tap is a record. Every record has a name attached, and every payment needs permission. Some system, somewhere, has to say yes before your money moves. Most of the time, it says yes so fast you never feel it. But yes, instantly, and always yes, are not the same thing. Because once money is a line in a database instead of an object in your hand, a new question becomes possible. One you could never ask about a coin. Not, how much do you have? But, what are you allowed to do with it? Now, if you're expecting me to tell you a shadowy group killed cash, I'm not going to, because it isn't true. We did this to ourselves, and mostly, we were happy about it. Look at how fast it happened. In Sweden, cash fell from around 40% of purchases to roughly 5% in 15 years. One of the steepest drops of any economy on Earth. In India, a country once almost 90% cash reliant, a homegrown system called UPI now handles more than 23 billion transactions in a single month. Nearly half of all real-time digital payments on the entire planet. India didn't need a new kind of money to go cashless. It just built better plumbing, and people ran to it. And every step was convenient. Tap to pay beats fumbling for change. Splitting a bill by phone beats an ATM run. A pandemic taught a whole planet to fear touching a banknote at the exact moment contactless went mainstream. Nobody had to be forced. And then a pandemic hit. Overnight, touching a shared banknote felt dangerous, and contactless payment went from a convenience to a public health measure. Whole countries crossed a line in months that might otherwise have taken a decade. And the habit, once broken, mostly didn't come back. But convenience quietly rewrites the rules underneath you. When a whole society moves its money onto digital rails, it moves a power that used to be scattered across 1 billion anonymous bills into a handful of systems that can be seen and steered from a single screen. We didn't hand anyone that power on purpose, we just made it possible. And possibility, in the hands of institutions, has a way of becoming policy. There's a phrase you'll hear more and more this decade, and most eyes glaze over the moment they hear it. Central bank digital currency. It sounds like a committee. It is the most important redesign of money in a century. Right now, 134 countries, representing 98% of the world economy, are building one. 5 years ago, that number was 35. This is not a fringe experiment. This is nearly every government on Earth moving in the same direction at once. So what is it? Here's the part that trips people up. The money in your banking app isn't actually the government's money, it's a private bank's promise, an IOU. You've lent the bank your dollars, and the app just shows what they owe you back. A central bank digital currency cuts out that middle step. It's the state's money, held directly by you. And that changes who stands between you and your money. With cash, the answer is no one. With a bank, it's your bank. With a central bank digital currency, it's the central bank itself. The institution that also writes the rules, sets the policy, and increasingly wants the money it issues to carry rules of its own. And that word, rules, is where the harmless acronym turns into the most consequential design decision of our lifetimes. Now, not all of these are the same. Some are wholesale, invisible plumbing between banks that you would never touch. The ones that matter for you are retail, money, the public holds directly. That is the version that reaches into your wallet, and the version this story is about. The word is programmable. Programmable money means money with software inside it, value that can carry instructions. And once you can write instructions into money, you can write things that were physically impossible with a coin. You could make money that expires. That stops working if you don't spend it by a certain date. Money that's restricted. That works on groceries, but not alcohol, on approved shops, but not others. Money that can be switched off. For one person, one merchant, one transaction, without touching anyone else's. Now, I want to be careful here, because this is exactly where honest analysis and internet panic part ways. Everything I just described is a capability, not a prophecy. No government has deployed all of it on its citizens. And some of these tools have genuinely useful uses. Disaster relief that can't be misspent. Stimulus that actually gets spent instead of saved. But it has already been tested on real people. In late 2020, the city of Shenzhen, China, ran a lottery. Nearly 2 million people applied. 50,000 won a digital red packet worth about $30 in the new digital yuan. And that money came with a catch written into the code. It was valid for only 6 days. Spend it by the deadline or watch it vanish. And, to be fair, that same feature has a friendly face. Money that can only be spent on food aid can't be quietly siphoned off by corruption. A stimulus payment that expires gets spent, not hoarded, exactly when a struggling economy needs it most. The tool isn't evil. And that is precisely what makes the question so hard. That wasn't a glitch, it was the point. A live demonstration that a government can now put a clock on your money. And cash, the thing that just sits in a drawer waiting for you, can't be given a deadline by anyone. So the question stops being, can money have rules? It already can. The question becomes, whose rules and who gets to change them? The idea isn't even new. Economists have dreamed of money that expires for over a century, a way to force spending and fight a downturn. What's new is that, for the first time, the technology can actually do it. The old dream and the new tool have finally met. To see one answer, look at the country running the largest experiment of its kind on Earth. China's digital yuan is no longer a pilot in the usual sense. More than 16 trillion yuan, over $2 trillion, has already flowed through it. across 3.4 billion transactions and 230 million wallets, numbers that dwarf every other digital currency project combined. And it's not staying inside China's borders. Through a cross-border project called M-Bridge, the digital yuan is being wired directly to the central banks of Hong Kong, the United Arab Emirates, Thailand, and Saudi Arabia. A plumbing system that lets big international payments move without ever touching the US dollar or the Western banking network. And that is the quiet strategic prize. Every cross-border payment that skips the dollar is a small loosening of American power, the ability to watch and to cut off that comes from sitting at the center of the world's money. A digital yuan network is, among other things, a way out from under all of that. From 2026, China is upgrading the digital yuan to pay interest, turning it from a digital version of cash into something the banking system itself can run on. In this model, the fact that the state can see the flows isn't a flaw to be apologized for. It's the feature. A more visible economy is, from the top, a more governable one. This is the control-forward vision of digital money, built at national scale, in the open. And it works. To be precise, China's digital yuan is not wired into its social credit system, and officials have promised what they call managed anonymity for small payments. But the capability, a single central record of who paid whom, sits there by design. The safeguard is a policy, and policies can change. Nigeria is the cautionary tale, and it's one almost nobody in the West heard. In 2021, Nigeria became the first country in Africa to launch a central bank digital currency, the e-naira. It was sold as financial inclusion, a way to bring the unbanked into the modern economy, and almost nobody used it. So in early 2023, the government reached for a shortcut. If people wouldn't choose the digital currency, maybe they'd use it if the alternative disappeared. The central bank pulled more than half of the country's physical cash out of circulation in a matter of months. The plan did not produce adoption. It produced chaos. People couldn't buy food. They couldn't pay for transport. Banks were stormed. There were riots in the streets of one of Africa's largest economies over the simple inability to get at their own money. And after all of it, the digital currency they were being herded toward was used by fewer than 1 in 200 people. The International Monetary Fund later found that 98.5% of the e-naira wallets that had been created had never been used, even once. The lesson was written in the clearest possible ink. Take away someone's cash to force them onto your system, and you do not earn their trust. You detonate it. And notice who actually used it. Not the poor and unbanked it was built for, but the urban, the connected, the already banked. The financial inclusion pitch was exactly backwards. The tool reached the people who needed it least. And Nigeria isn't a one-off. It's a pattern. Only 3 retail central bank digital currencies are actually live in the world today. Nigeria's, Jamaica's, and the one that started it all, the sand dollar in the Bahamas, launched back in 2020. 5 years in, the sand dollar makes up less than 1% of the country's currency, around a third of 1%. Not because it doesn't work, people just don't reach for it. Meanwhile, look again at India. Over 23 billion digital payments a month, a nearly cashless revolution. And it happened almost entirely without a central bank digital currency at all. Just fast, cheap, open payment rails connecting the banks people already had. Put those two facts side by side, and you get the paradox at the heart of this story. The world does not actually need a state-controlled programmable currency to go cashless. Ordinary digital payments already did that. So when a government insists on building its own anyway, one where it sits at the center, holding the ledger and, potentially, the rules, the honest question is, what does that add? For the citizen, often nothing they asked for. For the state, the answer is control. And that's not a slur. It's the actual design goal. Because underneath every one of these failures is the same missing ingredient: trust. People don't adopt money they suspect can be watched or switched off. And a government that has to force its currency onto people has already answered the question of why they were refusing it. Here's the objection I always hear. This is all hypothetical. Governments would never actually freeze ordinary people's money over politics. So let me take the hypothetical away. February 2022, Canada. A stable, wealthy democracy. A protest had occupied the capital for weeks. The government invoked emergency powers and did something it had never done before. It directed banks to freeze the accounts of people connected to the protest. Without a court order, without a judge, without a criminal conviction. Around 210 accounts holding roughly $8 million were frozen. The police handed banks a list of names, and the banks acted. Now, you can think the protest was right or wrong. That's not the point. The point is the mechanism. In a country with strong courts and strong rights, the financial off switch was flipped on ordinary people by administrative decision at speed, and the courts came after. That is only possible because the money was digital. You cannot freeze a mattress full of cash by sending a bank a spreadsheet. And this isn't unique to one crisis. In the United States, there's a long-running practice critics call debanking, where banks, sometimes under quiet regulatory pressure, cut off entire categories of lawful customers deemed too high risk or too controversial to serve. No charges, no trial, just a letter saying your account is closed, and often no explanation and no appeal. Congress is still fighting about it right now. And it reaches ordinary companies and ordinary people. Payment processors have cut off legal businesses overnight. One major platform once floated fining users thousands of dollars for spreading what it alone judged to be misinformation, before walking it back after the outrage. The point isn't any single case. It's that the switch exists, and it gets used. So understand what this means for the whole debate. We are worried about the control a programmable state currency could enable. And meanwhile, the softer version of that control already exists on the ordinary digital money you use today. A central bank digital currency wouldn't invent the off switch. It would wire it directly into the money itself and hand the fuse box to the state. If that still sounds alarmist, it's worth remembering that governments reaching for control over money in a crisis is not new. It's one of the oldest temptations there is. Go back to 1933. The United States, deep in the Great Depression. President Roosevelt signed Executive Order 6102 and made it illegal for ordinary Americans to hold most of their gold. Citizens were required to hand it over to the government at a fixed price under threat of a $10,000 fine or 10 years in prison. It took 40 years until 1974 before Americans could freely own gold again. Or go back just to 2016. India's Prime Minister went on television one night and announced that, at midnight, 86% of the country's cash, by value, would stop being legal money. Overnight. What followed was months of chaos, endless bank queues, and real hardship for the poorest, who lived in cash. And the kicker. Over 99% of that cash eventually came back into the banks anyway. But it did permanently accelerate India onto digital rails. Which, of course, is exactly where this story keeps pointing. The through line across 90 years is simple. The harder money is to see and seize, the safer you are from that decision. Cash was always the hard case. A programmable digital currency is the easiest case that has ever existed. Gold in 1933. Cash in 2016. Bank accounts in 2022. Different countries, different decades, the very same instinct. In a crisis, a government reaches for whatever money it can control, and the money it cannot reach is the money that protects you. Which brings us, finally, to the sentence I promised you at the very beginning. It wasn't said by a critic or a conspiracy theorist or someone trying to frighten you. It was said by Augustin Carstens, the general manager of the Bank for International Settlements. If you've never heard of it, think of it as the central bank for central banks, the institution at the very top of the global money system. In 2020, on a public panel, Carstens was asked to explain the difference between cash and a central bank digital currency. And he was completely honest. With cash, he said, we don't know who is using a $100 bill today. But with the new digital money, and I am quoting him, the central bank will have absolute control on the rules and regulations that will determine the use of that money. And also, we will have the technology to enforce that. Read that again, slowly. Absolute control over the rules that determine how the money can be used, and the technology to enforce it. That is not a leak. It's not a gotcha. It is the person at the top of the system describing the product, accurately, as a feature. The entire debate of this film compressed into one honest sentence by the one man with the least reason to exaggerate it. If a single sentence from the world's top central banker just changed how you look at the money in your pocket, that is exactly what this channel is built to do. Take the machinery running your life and make it visible, subscribe, and stay with me. Because the ending of this story is not the dystopia you're bracing for. Because absolute control is a design choice, and not everyone is choosing it. Look at Europe. The digital euro, which cleared a major hurdle in the European Parliament in June 2026, is being engineered deliberately to be almost the opposite of the Chinese model. It starts from privacy. It's built with cryptography, called zero-knowledge proofs, that can confirm a payment is valid without the central bank ever seeing who you are or what you bought. It's meant to have an offline mode that works phone to phone, as private as handing over a banknote. There's a hard cap on how much you're allowed to hold, somewhere between 500 and 3,000 euros, so it can't quietly replace the banking system. And, most importantly, European lawmakers have written in that it must not be programmable. It cannot be told what you're allowed to buy, same underlying technology as China's. Completely opposite philosophy. And that privacy isn't a promise scribbled in a footnote. It's built out of mathematics. A zero-knowledge proof lets the system confirm a payment is real and the money exists, while proving nothing about who you are. It's the difference between handing over your ID and simply proving you're old enough to walk in. And then there's the third path, the one the United States chose, which is to not build a retail central bank digital currency at all. In January 2025, an executive order flatly prohibited a U.S. central bank digital currency on the grounds that it threatened privacy and financial freedom. Instead, that summer, Congress passed the Genius Act, a law regulating stablecoins, privately issued digital dollars, fully backed by real dollars and government bonds that you can always redeem one for one. Stablecoins are already enormous. Hundreds of billions of dollars of privately issued digital money circulate today, most of it pegged to the dollar. America's bet is that if a digital dollar is coming anyway, better it be issued by companies it can regulate than by a central bank that could one day surveil. It's a genuine choice with genuine trade-offs. It's a bet that the digital dollar of the future should be issued by private companies under rules, not by the state directly. And whether that's wiser or just differently risky is its own debate. But it's a genuinely different answer to the same question. So there is no single inevitable future here. There are competing visions, control forward, privacy forward, and hands off being argued out in parliaments and central banks right now. And that argument is the most important one you're not following. Here's the twist I promised you at the start. The strongest evidence that this future isn't inevitable comes from the country that got furthest into it. Sweden, the poster child for going cashless. The place where 5% of purchases use cash and a whole generation has basically never used a coin. That same Sweden has spent the last 2 years quietly slamming on the brakes. The Swedish central bank now urges households to keep a stash of physical cash at home. Around 1,000 kronor per adult, roughly $100. Enough to survive a week if the digital systems go down. Not as nostalgia, as national security. Because a society where every payment runs through a network is a society that stops working the instant that network does. In a blackout, a cyber attack, or a war. And in 2026, the Swedish government went further, moving to legally require grocery stores and pharmacies to accept cash. The most cashless country on earth is now legislating cash back into existence. And there's a hard-edged reason for the reversal. A fully digital payment system is a single point of failure. A cyber attack, a cut undersea cable, a power grid knocked out in a war, and a cashless society simply cannot buy bread. Cash is the analog backup that always works. Sweden, sitting next to a hostile neighbor, did that math. And it's not alone. In the United States, New York just enacted a law requiring shops to accept cash, joining a growing list of states and cities banning cashless storefronts, with a National Payment Choice Act moving through Congress. And in Europe, the same month lawmakers advanced the digital euro, the EU also agreed to strengthen the legal status of physical cash. They are building the digital future and defending the physical past at the very same time, on purpose. Why? Because they've understood something. The breathless cash is dead headlines missed. Cash isn't just a payment method, it's a backup when the grid fails. It's privacy by default. And it's a limit on power. A form of money that keeps working when no one gives you permission. Once a society realizes it's about to lose all of that, it turns out a lot of people and a lot of governments decide they'd rather not. So let me give you the honest ending, not the scary one. The code is not the villain. The exact same digital rails can be built to spy on you or to protect you, to control what you buy or to guarantee your privacy. China and Europe are proving that with the same technology right now. So if the technology can go either way, then the thing that decides your future isn't the engineering, it's the rules written on top of it, and who gets to change them. And that is the real risk. Not a kill switch flipped by a cartoon villain, but the quiet, reasonable erosion of a promise. Privacy by design is a promise. It'll never be programmable is a promise. And promises made by one government in one calm year can be rewritten by the next government in the next emergency. Because there is always a next emergency. And it always comes with a perfectly good reason to make an exception. Just this once. Rights that live only in a settings menu can be edited. Cash's deepest protection was never that it was anonymous. It was that it required no one's permission to work. It answered to you and to no one else. That is the specific thing we are trading away. Not for a conspiracy, but for the convenience of a faster checkout. And it may well be worth it. But it should be a trade you make with your eyes open, not one that happens to you while you're looking at your phone. So, what do you actually do with all of this? Not panic, pay attention, keep a little cash, not as a prepper, but as a citizen holding one card you never have to explain. Read the design fights over the digital euro, over the stablecoin laws, over your own country's plans. Money is being redesigned. And for once, the public is still in the room. So the question for the next 10 years isn't whether money becomes digital. That's over. It already has. The question is whether the off switch on your money stays in your hand or quietly moves into someone else's. And the good news, the thing Sweden proves, is that this is still a choice. It is still being decided. And you still get a vote if you're paying attention. That's the lens. The future of money isn't being settled in the markets or the headlines. It's being settled in the design. In cryptography, in legislation, in fine print almost nobody reads. So keep a little cash. Watch who's writing the rules. And ask, of every new system, the one question that actually matters. Who holds the off switch? Follow the money. And we'll see you in the next one.